Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Yes, now I see myself. So welcome to the afternoon session of the first African Sustainable E-Waste Conference and Expo. My name is Simon Andersson, and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at We Center. We are super proud to be hosting this conference, and with more than 50 experts during 3 days, and also more than 500 participants are registered for either of the days or all days together. So thank you for that. And this session now is on e-waste standards and practices around the globe, where we will have some different examples shown, so that we have a lot to discuss and benchmark. First out, our first speaker for today, this afternoon session, is Mike Watson, who is the Chief Compliance Officer and board member, Chief Compliance Officer at Global Resale, and he's a board member of SERI, Sustainable Electronics Recycling International. Welcome to us, Mike, and how is the eastern parts of North America today?
It's great. Thanks for having me. Today, I would like to share with you some of how we formed our international standards around ITAD, end-of-life processing. And bear with me, I'm going to find, there we go. There. Can you see that? Simone, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So I'm going to give you a little history today, please, around the history and the value of the R2 standard and certification. And so everybody understands SERI, which I'm a board member of, is the nonprofit organization. SERI stands for Sustainable Electronics Recycling International. And we are the housing organization, the nonprofit housing organization for a process of recycling standard called R2. R2 is the abbreviation for reuse and recycling. It's very specifically focused on electronics end of life. The mission statement for SERI is to create a world where electronic products are reused and recycled in a way that promotes resource preservation, the well-being of natural environment, and the health and safety of workers and communities. What that means is we apply this mission through our R2 standard to certified facilities around the world. R2 was developed in response to a growing concern about unsafe disposal and processing in used electronics. And you can see from the pictures, when we began this journey, there was a tremendous, it was the Wild West, if you will, which means there was no controls, there was no best practices, there was no clear understanding of how e-waste should be processed. And you'll see as we move through this, I tend to not use e-waste as a term in my language or in my vocabulary, mostly because we don't see the byproducts of electronic end of life as waste. We see it as a big opportunity. The R2 standard was started in 2005. The US EPA, at the time I was the director of take back and compliance globally at Dell Computers. And they came to us in 2004 and said, You have a standard for your partners around the world. Can you help us build one for the entire industry? So in 2005, we convened a multi-stakeholder group and talked through the potential of creating a voluntary standard around the world that identifies the best practices for the growing volume of used electronics. In 2008, so it took us 3 years to create the base standard. In 2008, you can see from the timeline at the top of the screen, we released the very first version of R2 certification. And this is for facilities that are confirmed to be best practice facilities treating electronics at their end of life. Then the program grew globally, and in 2013, 5 years later, we created the second version of R2. Very quickly after that, not very quickly, sorry, it took us about 8 years to create the third version of the standard. And we are just releasing the third version of the standard. I believe the first facilities around the world have just been certified to the third version of R2 within the last few months in early 2021. The requirements for R2. So R2 is a standard, and it is created by a global group of very, very diverse people. 1/3 of the technical advisory committee that creates the content for R2 are many different sizes of recyclers and refurbishers around the world. So 1/3 of the TAC members, there's about 35 TAC members. About 1/3 of them, so probably 10 to 12, are recyclers from around the world. The other third, or the next third of the technical advisory committee is users and customers of R2 certified facilities. So the large users of electronics around the world, General Electric, Nestle, those would be considered customers. While they are not on the TAC, some of the large electronics manufacturers from around the world are on the technical advisory committee. And then there's 1/3 of the technical advisory committee that is made up of a miscellaneous group of auditors and certification bodies, environmental protection agencies around the world, and other industry experts. So we have the TAC divided into thirds: recycler, customer, and assorted experts in this field. And they create the content for the best practice standards for electronics end of life. R2, the major difference between R2 and any other evolving standard, and we see them evolving around the world, R2 is independent. So there's no member organization that drives the content. This is a accredited standards development process. ANSI is an accreditation, a global accreditation organization that validates our process for creating the standard. It's comprehensive. While it doesn't include all white goods, as many of the regulations do around the world, it is very focused on electronics, consumer electronics, such as desktops, servers, laptops, mobility devices. So it's comprehensive in its product set. As a matter of fact, we just agreed to adding an additional product grouping to the standard, and we'll be developing solar panel best practices for end-of-life management in the near future through the R2 standard. And it's universal. Universal in that it applies to any location in the world. It focuses on the national, state, and local regulations, and can be applied anywhere in the world. The certification program itself. Who's eligible? So R2 certification can be granted to collectors of electronics end of life, to electronics recyclers, refurbishers, brokers. Brokers are those that buy electronics at end of life and resell it without really modifying it at all, or modifying it, we'll call it. ITAD companies, information technology asset disposal is ITAD companies, returns and trade-ins, warranty repair companies, and material recovery processors, the smelters of the world. All of those are eligible for some level of R2 certification. The R2 certification is based on 10 core requirement areas, and all R2 facilities must be compliant with the 10 core requirement areas. The core requirement areas, examples would be worker health and safety, legal obligations, quality, environmental practices, best practices. Those would be the 10 core, or those are examples of the 10 core requirements. Additionally, if you have unique processes that are within your business model, such as downstream recycling, data sanitization, test and repair for refurbishment, specialty electronics reuse, material recovery, as I said, similar to a smelter, or brokering, as I explained. Each of those different types of business models have a unique and separate index with very specific obligations and requirements for the voluntary certification. And you can have, in your business model, you can have one, you can have multiple appendixes as part of the scope of your certification. Again, this is universal, so it is applicable globally. It supports the frameworks for all local and national regulatory requirements, any country, any state, any locality. It fits within the way the standard was written. And very important to the R2 standard, it requires proof of legality for all transboundary shipments of electronic end of life. So if you're moving electronics from one within intra-boundary, so if you're moving from one jurisdiction to another, let's say from Kenya to UK, you have to be able to show proof of legality. So you have to show that you have to prove that those shipments are valid and legal based on the contents of the shipment, and documentation and evidence is required for all of this. The countries and facilities that are certified, we are now at 961 facilities globally and growing. We're at 32 countries that have certified facilities within their borders, and we're in 7 regions of the world. I'll show you a map. The map shows how we've grown since 2010. We're at 2021 now, so in 11 years, we have grown from 1 country to 32 countries. You can see that timeline across the bottom. You can see the flags in each country or continent, and that's the number of certified facilities that we have in each continent. You can see we have opportunities for growth in Africa. The certifying bodies. So these are, each building is certified by an independent third-party audit firm. Independent third-party audit firms audit to the standard, to the specifications that are written within the standard, and on the screen you can see the names of at least 6 that are currently certified to audit to the R2 standard. And all of these are global. All of these have a reach around the world. Let's talk very quickly about the circular economy. So today, the circular economy, or I'm sorry, the typical disposition or disposal of electronics is you remove raw materials from the earth. You make these products in factories. You use them every day, and then you dispose of them. And typically, the products are sent to landfills or waste locations around the world. That doesn't help at all with our circular economy. Circular economy is where we remove, so take is the removing of the material from the product itself. We encourage the reuse of that raw material in new product for electronics. That's the make section. Then the use and the repair is pretty standard. Repair is extending the life of electronics as long as you can possibly extend it.
Mike, we are restricted in time, so I will have to please.
All right, thank you. Reuse is the product, again, extending its life even further. And then the recycling takes the product back into new products. So it's mining the raw materials out of that waste pile back into new material. So we'll go quickly to best practices. So the best practices for the circular economy are create standards, build certified facilities that meet those standards of reuse, and then drive commitment for people to adopt and engage in the best practices to get those raw materials back into new product. Very quickly and finally, there is a knowledge base. If you want to know more about SERI and the R2 program, if you'll go to sustainableelectronics.org and look at knowledge base, you're going to be able to get your questions answered at that online site. Thank you very much, and I will stop sharing and I will go on mute.
Thank you so very much, Mike. It is exciting that there is a framework for recycling, but also for the reuse to make sure it is handled in a both safe manner for those working with it and also, of course, in a orderly manner in general, so that we don't end up putting things where they shouldn't be. So I'll save the questions for later because you will stay with us, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
The panel. Great. All right. So thank you.